Hi, everybody. I hope y'all are doing well. I hope y'all are having a great day today. If you're new here, I want to welcome you to School of Scarlett, where we talk about the power of unconditional love. So, today I wanted to continue on talking about play. So, I've already filmed one video about play, and I finally made it back to my office. If you haven't watched that video, it is a video previous to this one. And I actually had to film that one on a whim, and I actually filmed it in the location where I used to film my videos right after my awakening. So, if you're interested in that, I would really encourage you to watch that prior to watching this one. This is going to be more of my sharing of experiences of working in the classroom. And so there was a time that I worked in the classroom and I've taught different grade levels and I've, enjoyed some more than others. So I'm going to talk about my most favorite time period teaching. And so this is when I taught pre-K, and I taught pre-K at Head Start. And Head Start is a program here in the United States. If you're not here in the United States, it's a program that helps families that are low income or have disabled children get an early head start in their education. So they can go to pre-K and they can even start as early as infants in early Head Start, and then they can move up to Head Start that begins at 3 years of age, and they can have 3-year-old classes, 4-year-old classes, and then 5-year-old classes, and then they transition into kindergarten. And this is meant to give them an advantage, to really help them out, to get them to where they need to be. If they're low income, it's seen that possibly that they could be, a little bit behind some of the other students that maybe were going to daycare or, private pre-Ks. And so this is just something to really help children to have that head start. Anyhow, that is where I worked for a little while. And so originally I started working there, working with special needs children. So I worked a lot with kids that had autism and Down syndrome and some ADHD and kind of oppositional defiance disorders and things like that, where children were being very aggressive. And so that is mainly what my role there was to work with behaviors. And so I worked with a lot of children that had autism, and I learned a lot about that. And in doing that, part of that was to include the children in the classroom experience. Later on in my career there, I began to actually teach in the classroom, a whole classroom. And so that is where I will be sharing my experiences with you today, because it's a very rich experience when you're working with a group of students. So this grade level is something that is very near and dear to me because it is a very playful age. It is a very imaginative age. So prior to working there, I didn't have a huge experience with children other than working with parents who had children that had behavior issues. And so I would teach parents how to handle their children's behavior issues without, doing spanking or any kind of physical punishment. So it was more of a positive approach to discipline. And so that is what I did. And so I had that experience, but I hadn't worked a whole lot with children. My experience was mainly with my daughter, which I enjoyed immensely. The age basically from baby to like 6 years old, I really enjoyed that age. I enjoyed all the activities, I enjoyed the learning, I enjoyed really setting that foundation and engaging and learning with my daughter. And all of that really came along with me when I started teaching pre K. So it was really beneficial in that way. So in this classroom, I will share that I've taught different grade levels and things like that. In almost every classroom, it is literally like its own ecosystem. It has a very delicate balance, and it is a very special thing. There's certain energies that work in there, mostly working off the teacher, but the students themselves carry all kinds of things. And like I said, in these classrooms that I had, they were the most densely populated classrooms of autistic children. So anytime that children would come into the center that had disabilities, they were preferred that they would go into my classroom because I had so much experience with children with disabilities. So my room was very dense with children with disabilities. So out of 25 children, I had 9 children in there that either had autism, Down syndrome, or some sort of intellectual disability. So that was quite a bit. Most other classrooms had 3 children that had about, some sort of disability. So it was a bit of a challenge, but each child at that point that I was now teaching the classroom had their own aid and help with that. So anyhow, I'm going to kind of share some of the things that happened there and some of the things that come to mind. And not everything's going to come up right away here. It's just going to be my experience, just organically right now, what I can remember. I just know that everything was so beautiful at that time, and the experience of play, love, and the outcomes of that were huge. So, anyhow, let's talk about some students in the class, okay? So, when you walked into the class, you would walk in, let's say you were a student walking into the class, you'd go put your stuff away in your cubbies. You'd be greeted by the teacher and the aide there, and, greet and put your stuff away. And generally, what the aide and teacher are looking for is really to have that positive relationship with the child, give them a high five, a fist bump, something to really make them feel welcomed. Ask them what they did yesterday, or really make them feel like they're that you were expecting them, that you love them, that you're happy that they're here today. And so that was the first part. And so there was a little boy there, and he had autism. His name was Romeo, and he walked in, and he would walk in oftentimes with like toys and things, because kids with autism a lot of times will carry around little items, and it's kind of like a security blanket for them. And they have to carry, well, they don't have to, but they oftentimes carry around these little toys, blankets, little things that cause them to feel a little bit more secure. And eventually it could lead to, I've seen kids carrying around backpacks with lots of toys and things like that in it. So it can escalate. And so basically, when these kids come in with the toys, we let them know that, toys need to stay at home. And but in this case, Romeo, he had a very severe type of autism, that he was very on the other side of the spectrum. He was very autistic. He was nonverbal. He was showing a lot of aggression due to him not being verbal, and wanting to get his point across. So he walked in with a dinosaur one day, and I could already tell, I could feel his energy, that if we took that dinosaur away, he was going to have a meltdown. And I knew that about him. And so the aide immediately let him know, Romeo, we don't bring toys to school. Give it back to your mom. And she was very, very stern. She didn't greet him or anything beforehand. She didn't even smile at him. And so he would immediately like throw himself down on the ground and cry and like hit the ground. He would hit her. He would scratch her. And she got quite injured over the time that she was working there. And anyhow, but me seeing what would happen, all of these things, I realized that the rule doesn't just apply to everyone. Um, they made it seem in the center that if children bring toys to school, they have to be immediately sent home. They're not to be there. Well, I've never really followed the rules anywhere I've worked. Every time something just didn't make sense to me, or I knew that it could have been another way, a better way, I just did it, because I knew that in the end it would all be okay. And it always has been. So I don't worry about that. But anyhow, the center had this rule about no toys at school. Well, with Romeo, I decided no, Romeo can bring toys to school. And, people would say, okay, well, how is that going to look on the other kids? And the other kids are going to start bringing toys to school. And it was my job then as a teacher to really explain to the kids and really show to the kids why it's so important that Romeo be able to share his toy with us, um, because he needs that in order to be able to participate with us. And it's important for him. And he is a little different than everybody else in the class. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong to even point that out. It's just what it is. And so in my classroom, we really dealt with reality. We didn't do baby talk. We didn't do any of this stuff. We did real things. We talked about real issues. You could really think about it like Mr. Rogers, how he brought a lot of, issues that kids had at home, to the surface so that they could talk about it, because kids do feel confused sometimes. And so we would talk about anything and everything. While sometimes I would notice, other teachers or other situations where a student might bring up a very touchy topic or something that, maybe wasn't something that they wanted to discuss, and they would completely dismiss it, and not even really in a way that was um, nourishing to the child. Basically, they would just say, okay, we're going to talk about something else. We don't talk about that at school. And so when you say we don't talk about that at school, it instantly shuts that off and cuts it off. And it creates, again, one of those shadows, like a psyche. And it can happen as early as pre K. So we really have to allow children to express themselves. We had something there called daily news. And so every morning I would pick two students to share with me their daily news. And a lot of times they would share things that happened at home. And some people may not have allowed those kind of talks and conversations to happen, but those things were things that needed to be said, and the child needed to process them, and also the teacher needed to be there to emotionally support the child in a healthy way. So I always allowed children to speak. And if the children's ever said anything that was harmful to them, something was going on, abuse or something like that, of course, I reported it, took care of it. But this was a safe space. Our classroom was a safe place where we dealt with actual reality. So when Romeo came in wanting to keep his toy, the students surprisingly had no problem with it. So I would let Romeo know when he came in, it is okay that you brought the dinosaur to school today. So Romeo, will you go put it in your backpack for me, and we will bring it out during our show and tell, which was around the time of that daily news time. And he would do it, and he wouldn't kick and scream. He would actually be very happy, and he'd walk in. And I had long hair like I do now, and he always really liked my hair. So he would touch my hair and smile at me and walk in. So he had a whole different demeanor when he was approached in this way. And the class had no problem with it. All of these things that the director would say about, if we allow one child, then they're all going to do it, and then the class is going to get out of control and all this stuff. It really depends on the teacher and how the teacher presents it, and if it is in truth and reality. Of course, if the teacher is just allowing all kinds of stuff into the classroom for absolutely no reason, it can become chaos. But I was very meticulous in thinking and knowing whether or not this was a battle I wanted to fight. And I still do that with, my daughter or anything. Is this really a battle I want to fight? And is it even worth it? And is there maybe a learning lesson in here that we can actually use this to our benefit? So that is how I looked at things. So that was Romeo. And so Romeo, he had very severe autism, and I was able to really help him a lot, and he was able to be calm around me and to really work with me, where he couldn't really do that with other people. I tried to show his aide how to do that and how to really be a little softer with him, and it was really about energy and working with autistic children. So really approaching them with a very soft energy, almost like you're not there. You have to almost become invisible. I've mastered this because I've worked so much with autistic children, and I also understand. Uh, I have to be with autistic child to really know, but some of them are very into certain things. Like I had one child that was very into cars, so everything had to be around cars. There's nothing wrong with that. I was able to teach every lesson that I needed to around cars. Of course, I wasn't using the books that the curriculum gave me. I found books that were similar, or I even created stories or puzzles or whatever the other children were doing in the shape of cars and things like that. And that child was able to do it. Um, and I did have an aide in there once, Miss Edith, and she was very close to me. She's a very stern woman. She's, no frills, just, you know, whatever it is. So with Romeo, let's say she was a little bit like the aide. Um, so with Romeo, she was actually really close to Romeo. She really gave him a lot of love. She gave him a lot of affection. She would pick him up, give him hugs and kisses and stuff like that. But if she wanted him to eat something, she would flat out tell him, Romeo, eat that. You have to eat that. Eat 2 bites or you can't have this. Now, she was very stern like that. But that just didn't seem to work with the autistic children, whereas with some other children, it may work. So it really, teaching and working with children, it really is a relationship with the child and really getting to know them and their authentic selves and how they function, and how their nervous system functions, how they are they introverted, extroverted, all of these things. Getting to know them is very important in being able to reach them and actually teach them. So, one nice thing about Head Start that I really liked was that prior to even starting in the classroom, during the summer, the teachers were all required to do home visits to the children's home. So, and this is in a small town in Texas. We have a lot of low income people, we have rich people, we have all kinds, but there is more low income people. And so, with it being Head Start, we kind of know that's probably going to be low income homes. Well, that doesn't really mean anything, but it allows the teacher to really go into the home and get to know, what is their living environment like? Do they keep a clean home? Because you can tell a lot about a person by their home and their mental state. So that is, a reality of life. If a person has a very dirty home, their mental state is chaos. Okay, so you could see all of that. You could also see their mental. I was able, prior to working there, I went to school for psychology and worked in counseling. So I was able to see the mental state of the parent in speaking to them in the home. I'd probably spend about 45 minutes with the parent, just getting to know the child, asking questions. The child would want to take me around to show me their room, the backyard, and different things. And so the child felt safe knowing that their parent was happy and inviting to have the teacher there and was having a conversation about the child and having an interest in the best interest of the child. The child's sitting right there and observing all this. And the parent, in turn, is really realizing how much the teacher is invested and interested in their child. So there's not this discord where I've seen in public schools and things like that when I started teaching there. So there is this connection, and the fact that the child knows that you've been to their home, you've seen their siblings, you've seen their room. The first day of school is so much easier. They're excited. They're like, ah, teacher, I know you. I've been waiting to see you. And they walk in and they're happy. There's always a couple kids that have separation anxiety, but this works so much better. And the rapport and relationship with the parent is so much stronger. And so, even prior to starting school, we would do the home visit, and then we would also send a letter home. And it would usually be a fun postcard with stickers or an activity for the child to do. So, the child was very excited to start school. This was a very good thing. So, I really liked Head Start. And Head Start, has their own curriculums that they use. While I was there, they changed curriculums 3 times, and I really liked their curriculums, but I also had a lot of my own ideas. I'm a very hands on person. I'm a person that really is very visual. So when I teach children and things like that, I bring in a lot of items from home. I bring in pumpkins, I bring in fruit. We make things like recipes and stuff in the classroom. We do science experiments in the classroom, things that are not in the curriculum. It doesn't matter to me. If I think it's interesting and exciting and it's going to evoke a love of learning, I'm going to bring it. And I've always done that. I think in Head Start, I didn't make any money because I was constantly spending money, but because I loved it. I loved doing that. So I don't think I made any money there. And my husband would say that, he was like, wow, you're like constantly, spending for the classroom and doing all this stuff. But my husband saw the love that I had for that class, that he was supportive of it too. He didn't have any problem with me spending basically my whole salary on items and things for my kids. I bought all these things for my kids, for my classroom, holidays and stuff. I make them gift bags, whatever they needed. We had so much fun in there. And so my husband would see this and he actually became interested in my classroom. Of course, he never came to the classroom or anything like that, but he would cut up pieces of 2x4s and stuff like that for the kids to use as blocks to build with, to make Father's Day crafts with. He would cut up natural pieces of wood to make like tree blocks that are very popular in the Waldorf education. And so he would create and make things for my classroom. And at that time, that was a very special time for me because that was a time that me and him were very connected, even in what I do for work, where sometimes with psychology, he's not real sure what I'm talking about or what we're doing or what's happening. And so this was a really cool time, and he would talk about his teachers and what he learned and things that his teachers would bring to school. And I would talk to him about the teachers I had growing up and how they did things. And so we had very beautiful experiences growing up to a certain point. And then there was like a shift in education, it seemed like. And I'll talk about this at a later point when I talk about play and the time when I moved to a different city. And so that'll come out later, but there is different ways to do education. And there's different ways that work for people. Actually, I'm a big proponent of play. But my daughter, I provided her with a beautiful experience of imaginative play and all kinds of stuff. But actually, she gravitated towards worksheets. She gravitated to even creating her own quizzes and pretending that she was a teacher and teaching others. And she would actually create quizzes and take them to her friends. I mean, it was weird because no friend at that age wants to do quizzes, but that's what she would do. Um, so my daughter wasn't as imaginative as I imagined it to be, but that was okay because I realized she was, my child, and I was a teacher and I've been like this, and I come from a long lineage of this as well. So it was just natural. Whatever's happening is natural, so it's okay. And that's how it was. So there's different curriculums that work for the different people. And when she started kindergarten, I really was wanting to put her in a Montessori school. She had been in Montessori preschools and all of that stuff. And but by the time kindergarten started, she was so into like academics and really just sitting down and doing worksheets and finding out answers and things like that, that I put her in a school that was more academically based, not so much play based, because that is how she was learning, and that's how she naturally wanted to learn. So you really have to go with the child and what they want, not necessarily what you believe. And so I do believe play is the best way to learn. But if my daughter is learning a different way, I have to support that. The same thing for the students in my classroom. So I always provided different ways of learning. It wasn't always just visual examples of things. I also provided the worksheets. And every center there was different ways to learn. And I really set my classroom up like a Montessori classroom. Of course, this wasn't how the classrooms were supposed to be set up. This wasn't the rules there. That wasn't what I should have been doing. It wasn't even the curriculum. You were supposed to have certain things in a center. And so I was warned that when they would do evaluations, teacher evaluations, like 2 or 3 times a year, that I wasn't going to do very well. The fact alone that my classroom wasn't set up as they had said, with certain things that they needed in the classroom, um, that alone was going to tick off a bunch of things that weren't there for me. Well, I was there 3 or 4 years, and in all those 3 or 4 years, I had the best evaluations of everybody in that school. And I always did everything different. My classroom was set up like a Montessori classroom. It even had Montessori items. Everything in there was Montessori. And the way that I taught the children was Montessori. The way that we had to eat with the children, the way that I showed them how to eat, about food, all of that stuff was Montessori. Everything I did was play based. And so, how did my scores always be the high, or how were they always the highest? Well, I certainly did get some marks that I didn't meet certain things, but I got remarks and marks for actual teaching. So, where I lacked in how I set up my classroom, even though I still believe it's the right way to do it, where I lacked in all of that, I made up in my actual teaching and delivery and everything about that. And I would get remarks where it would say, we really like the way that you do this. Would you be willing to share this with other teachers? We really like the way that you do this. It was really nice to see the way that you handled this. So it was a very it was a meaty kind of evaluation where my peers would just get back evaluations that were just ticked off what they met and didn't meet. So then I began to have people coming into my room to learn how I was teaching the children. And they would take pictures and videos and all that stuff. And my pictures and videos would be the ones that would be showcased on the website. And I haven't worked there in maybe like 10 years. And I went onto their website recently because I was going to start volunteering or subbing there again. And my pictures and videos are still up there on their homepage. So this is something that, I really had a passion for, but I didn't allow a curriculum or somebody that has a title of director to choose and decide what I had an expertise in. So I just did what was best for the children, regardless. If I got fired for that, okay, I lost my income on this and I'll just go find something else. That's how I look at jobs and things like that, is I'm going to do it the right way, the way that it feels right, And if that doesn't work out, then that's not the place for me, and some other opportunity will open for me. So that was just a very beautiful experience there. Let's talk about some other children. So, as I was talking about the daily news in the morning that the children share things, we also do a morning song. And there was a little boy in my class, the most sweet little boy named Ryder. I knew instantly from seeing him that there was something special about him. As a teacher, you know this. You see certain children and students, and you just know they may be very quiet, but there's something very special in there. Anyway, Ryder would never talk. He would never play with anybody else, even if, and he would eat really fast, which kind of concerned me. But I went to his house and everything was okay. But um, he was like that. And then one morning, it took a while. He began to sing. And so we were doing the morning song, and he would never sing. We sang many songs throughout the day. He would never sing. This morning, he began to sing. He was louder than anybody in that class. I was like, "Who is singing?" And I turn around, and it's Ryder. And he's singing with this voice like an angel. That boy had the most beautiful voice in the world. And since that day, we were like, "Whoa, Ryder, that voice is beautiful." Since that day, he would sing every time. Every time we'd do music, he was singing, and he was the loudest one in the class singing. Otherwise, he was very quiet. But that to me was a breakthrough. And that is like what I, as a so called teacher, really live for. There was a little boy named, and that's all safety and love, and that's why he was able to continue doing it. If we would have ignored him, or if we would have said, "Oh, Ryder, you're singing," like, and maybe laugh at him or something like that, he probably would never do it again. But there was so much love and support in that classroom from what was already built between all the children and everything, that it was perfect. um, so anyhow, checking something on my phone there. But that was Ryder. And then there was a little boy named Arhan. Arhan never talked. And actually, he had a disability, like an intellectual disability of some kind, a rare one that wasn't really known. And he wouldn't really participate. He was actually very grumpy. You'd ask him, especially during like exercise time, every student would take like a turn kicking a ball or doing something, playing with the parachute or something. But he didn't want to do it. And so I tried to encourage him, Arhan, come on, let's do this. You can do it, Arhan. And he wouldn't want to do it. He'd go, and he just like, he just get real grumpy. And you could just tell in his face and everything. He didn't want to do it. And so one day he tried. One day he tried. I think we were all we were taking turns skipping down a row or something, and it was his turn, and he was started skipping, and that was the first time he ever participated in exercise. He never wanted to. And the class saw that, and they saw, and they knew that, Ryder never did that, or not Ryder, Arhan never did that. And so when he started doing it, the class started cheering him. They started saying, "Go Arhan, go Arhan, go Arhan," and they just started clapping for him and everything. And he just started skipping more, and he got into it. And since that day, he continued to participate in exercise. So he really needed to feel safe and loved. Some children really need that. And I know that because I was one of those children that was very quiet, and I wasn't really asked, or to participate a lot. Eventually, people just start to ignore you. But in my classroom, it was different. We'd try and try. And then whenever he did, or, she did, or whatever, it was beautiful. We also had a little girl named Ariana, and she had autism. And she was really unusual in a lot of different things. But anyhow, she was very quiet to herself, and she would also get very upset about things very easily. One day we were out in the playground, and there was caterpillars that were around that time. It was spring, and I think this was her first time having seen caterpillars, or maybe she had seen them before at home. But she picked them up, and she woke up. So this is the thing about teaching. Some of these very quiet students, or students that you see that you think, okay, that is a special student, but they haven't opened up yet. Well, she was one of these. Literally, her face transformed. It was smiles, everything, and she even started talking and like about the caterpillars. Before that, she was very almost nonverbal. She would only say a few things. And so she would put a caterpillar on each finger. There was a ton of caterpillars. She'd walk around with them. She'd put them on arms. She would do this for, I think, about a month or two before the caterpillars disappeared. But those caterpillars awakened her. And ever since that had happened, she began to eat at lunch with everybody, where before she was kind of like walking around and wouldn't really want to sit down. And that was another thing. I allowed my students to get up and walk, and it wasn't a problem. Not the whole classroom was walking around during lunch, just some students that needed to. It's okay to allow for certain people's needs. We all have individual needs. Doesn't mean that we need to just make everybody uniform and the same and perfect and rigid in this way. We all have different needs. Some students need to move more than others. Some don't need to move that much. Some need to make more noise. Some don't. And the teacher really has to balance all of this. Like I say, it's a very delicate ecosystem. But in order to really balance this ecosystem, there has to be a lot of love, a lot of understanding, and there has to be a sense of family and unity in that classroom. That's what's very important. And when you have that, you don't have behavior issues. You don't really have issues with parents either, because they're part of this. Like when the children would misbehave or anything would happen, I had a relationship with the parents. I could call them, I could explain to them. I would even explain to them how we worked on conscious discipline, which was a curriculum that I used. And I would share that with the parents and send home material on how they could consciously discipline their own children so that they could be in tune with their emotions and be able to process everything better. So that was a very beautiful place. But it's also the place that I learned that you really have to be playful in order to get the message across as a teacher. You have to use voices, you have to be an actor, which is something that I really liked because I liked acting already. You have to literally be an actor and actress to be a teacher, an effective one. When you read a book, you have to become those characters. Every character in that book, you got to make the noise. You got to get into it, and if they're not paying attention, walk around, do something that's going to get their attention about it. Make sure that there's closeness, that you're in proximity to them. Using playful things. Sometimes I would completely switch up the book. I'd say I'd take out a book and they knew it was the hungry caterpillar, but I'd say it's the big brown bear book. And of course they would be like, no, it's not the big brown bear book, it's. And so you want to be playful with them. Of course I knew what the book was, but I was always playing with them about stuff. And if they weren't paying attention, whatever, there's a big clown out there. They turn and then look back. There's not. Okay, now I got your attention. Now let's get back to what we're doing. And so everything's a game. Everything's a game with children, but everything's a game with life too. When I became a director of counseling later on in my career, I had to lead just a few people, but I was constantly having to also be a team lead to other programs that were going on, because I had worked in those and I had experience in those. And in order to teach people, you really have to be engaging. It's even for adults, it's very boring to sit there and just listen to a long talk about something that you have to do at work, policies, things that are very, very boring. So you got to make them fun. We'd go out to the restaurant instead of doing it in the office. I'd say, let's go out to the restaurant that was just down the street, and we're going to go do it there. We'd spend 10, 15 minutes talking about it and then joke and have fun. And they were drinking. I didn't care. Okay. And so all of this stuff, and we would have so much fun. Our relationships and my coworkers there were very close. So I am still very close to my coworkers that I worked there at that center. There's two that are still very close to me and friends. So all of that happens from connection. Otherwise, it's just boring, and you just go complain about how boring that meeting was. So it's all about the experience. It's all about the play in life. And so at Head Start, also at that time, something very beautiful happened with my teacher's assistants. So as a teacher, you get a teacher's assistant because there's so many children in the class. And during nap time, there was a nap time there, and everybody would go down for a nap, which I thought was amazing because when my daughter was that age, she would not nap at all. So when I walked into that situation, I thought, how in the world am I going to get 25 4-year-olds to nap all at the same time for an hour and a half? Well, it happened. So it can happen, and it happened every day. So it takes a little time, but anyhow, when they were all asleep, this was a time where I would like grade their work, homework, whatever, and do their folders to send home. As I was doing that, my TA would actually, that was her job, but I really enjoyed doing it. But anyway, when she was there, she would talk to me while I was doing this. And at first, I had a TA named Miss Edith, and Miss Edith was a very stern woman. And because we um, in my classroom were very honest. We didn't do small talk. We didn't do anything. We always talked about very deep topics. We went straight for everything. When we read a book, we went straight to the main topic, a topic of life, and we examined it. We talked about it. And so, because of all this, because we talked about death, because we talked about um, having to do things that we don't want and what happens and this and that, Miss Edith began to open up to me, and she had never seen a counselor, she had never seen a therapist, nothing, but she had a lot of trauma from her mother being extremely strict with her and like making her kneel on rice for punishment. She was forced to eat when she didn't want to eat. Was forced to eat egg, like raw eggs and tuna and things that she didn't like, which is one of the reasons she had a lot of trouble sometimes with those foods. But anyhow, she opened up about that, and she began to tell me about her mom and work through that trauma. And then she began to tell me about the good things about her mom. And her mom at this time was actually on dialysis, and not doing very well. She died a year later. But she was able to transform her relationship and just talking about her mother, to a more loving relationship. And it became like a very close bond for her. But it also became very hard for her when her mother passed away. But she thanked me, and we have like this bond for life. If I ever see her out at Walmart or anything, I don't generally hug people a lot, or that's not how I usually am. But I see her, and we just meet each other, and we know, our souls know, we know what happened between us. And so it was very beautiful, the things that can happen when we allow for that deep talk, that nitty gritty, the ugly talk that we don't even want to talk about around children. It's all needed, it's all accepted, this is part of life. This is why people are so confused, because we block these things out and not discuss them. It's just normal, it's just happening. Doesn't mean anything, but we do need to process it a little bit. And then later, I had a teacher's assistant named Cindy. And during this time was the time that I was actually getting remarried to my husband now. Or not remarried, I was getting married to my husband now. And there was a lot of trouble between myself and my mother at that time. And so I was kind of on my own, really. I was kind of separated in that separation space of a family. And Miss Cindy, she's an older woman, an older Christian woman, and she was really good with the kids and stuff like that. But during our nap times, she helped me. So during the nap times, like I say with Miss Edith, we would talk about her thing. With Miss Cindy, she began to talk to me about some relationship problems she was having with her husband, and she was reading a book. I don't know what it was now, but it was an amazing book. She would read me like a chapter, and then talk to me about everything she'd learned in marriage so far. She was like in her 60s and had been working with children for a very long time. Had a very rich experience of life, really. A lot of struggle and a lot of resilience, and just a beautiful person. But anyway, she would share like marriage. She would share so much that I think it's so important to have like an older, uh, like if you're a woman, an older woman, or if you're a man, an older man, as kind of like a mentor for you, because they have so much life experience that they can share with you. So she began to do that for me. She began to really be this kind of like mothering figure for me when I didn't really have that right there. She began to do beautiful things for me. She threw a bridal shower for me there at work, and it was really beautiful and nice. I didn't have anybody else at that time doing that for me. She helped me plan my wedding, so that was very beautiful. She helped me decorate for my wedding. She made a lot of the things. She made my life very easy at work. So she was just a beautiful person. And then after I left Head Start, we still maintain this connection, and it's a connection for life. She's helped me get jobs. I've helped her get jobs. We are always kind of in this ebb and flow of back and forth with each other. And she was kind of like this mothering figure for me when I needed it. And so it was very beautiful. There are some of the things that happened and the connections that I made. Um, so with children, it's always a game of life and play, and it's everything's always an adventure. For example, when I take them outside, we'd have to go through all the hallways. We'd have to go through the hallways, and generally, children walking in a line doesn't seem like a big deal. Most people can walk in a line. Well, preschoolers, it's another story. You really have to teach them that. It's their first time at school. They really don't know. So I would teach them to walk, to the playground. But what I would notice is that they were always wiggling. They were always going like that and this and like, skipping and like doing their shoes where they would make noise and things. And so I thought, I know that they want to move, but they're going to go outside. And I told them, you're going to go outside and move. So as soon as you get outside, you can move, you can kick, you can do whatever you want. But when we're going, from the classroom to the playground, we're going to be ninjas. We're going to be very quiet where no one can hear us. We're going to just go through the hallways like ninjas, like we're invisible. No one's going to hear our footsteps. We're going to tiptoe. So let's tiptoe like ninjas. And so we'd go through the halls like that. And, maybe it might look silly, but all of my students did it. And all of my students were calm and got outside, safely. And as soon as they went outside, they were wild, and they got their energy out. So it's just a matter of making it a game, a play. If I sat there and just, griped about you're out of lines, put your arm down, put your hands behind your back, this and that, it'd be miserable. So I really learned some lessons there about how play makes life so much easier. If y'all have not watched the movies of Mary Poppins or read the book Mary Poppins or Mary Poppins Returns, they're all good. Mary Poppins is just the example of that. She is someone basically like a magical character that just comes in, right? And her whole thing, if you really watch the movie, it's about how life is not that serious. It really has no purpose or meaning. It's just how you do it. Are you going to have fun? And so I wanted to bring some of the quotes, but actually I didn't even really write them down. But she has beautiful quotes. So on the next video, I will share some of Mary Poppins quotes about play. But she has quotes along the lines of, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Well, yeah, we don't want to take medicine. We don't want certain things in life, but you turn it a little bit into sugar, it's so much easier, isn't it? So that is what this is, you know. And when, you have an awakening of some kind, spiritual, whatever it happens to be, maybe you go to therapy and something shifts within you begin to see this. All these things begin to shed, and the true self comes through. The true self is just plain love. It's the highest frequency. It's literally a frequency. Um, and then it's just love and play. That's all it is. That's all it is. There's no consequence to it. There's no reason. It's it's just what it is. And so I'd recommend watching Mary Poppins or Mary Poppins Returns, and that kind of will bring that essence of what I'm talking about, of what I'm really talking about here. So today's just really kind of a chit chat of my adventures in the classroom, of my adventures of what I learned in the classroom, what my students learned in the classroom. There is so much more. If you're a teacher, it's just endless, the stuff that you see and learn being around children. So it's a beautiful thing, but it continues on. It continues on into adulthood. It's not something that disappears, and it's a skill and tool that you really need as an individual. A while back, I posted a video about the music video for a Pocahontas song. The Pocahontas song is called "The Colors of the Wind," I believe. And so it's talking about how can you paint with all the colors of the wind. Life is going to give you ugly. Life is going to give you desperate. Life is going to give you suffering. Life is going to give you love. Life is going to give you joy, laughter. All of these things are colors. Can you paint with all those colors? When the students walked into my classroom, each student was their own individual color. I had to paint with all those colors and make it work. Okay. I didn't try to change the color. I didn't try to erase the color and then color it in how I want. No, I see you. I saw Ryder. I saw all these students. I saw who they really were. And I want them. I don't want to change them. So you support them. and to let them be. So I'm sorry. It's just, I get very emotional now. I cry over love very easily. And it's just something that naturally happens to me. It's also kind of hard to make these videos sometimes because actually I feel it, but I know it can be very distracting to the viewer. But it's something that happens to me so easily. Emotions are so fluid for me, kind of like a child. So a child will go from crying to laughing to angry to sad and to tired, and it's just crazy. I remember my husband at the time calling my daughter bipolar. And I was like, what? She's not bipolar. This is completely normal. That's just normal to go fluid through emotions. When you feel something, feel it. Don't repress it. Don't repress it. Let it out. And so that's just the thing. It's just everything's just fluid. It's just flowing. It's just life. Every moment is already perfect and complete. So there's nothing to worry about. Life shows you that. So I just wanted to share that with you along the lines of play, what I learned about play in the classroom. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you're new here, I would love to have you be part of my channel. Please subscribe to my channel. If you are interested in anything else from me, I have my information on my channel page. And I also have my items and things below. I've written a book about my awakening story called Love, Death, Nothing. And I've also created a journal with journaling prompts with all the questions that I've had to ask clients and people throughout the years that I feel are the most effective questions that I've ever asked clients. And these are meant for you to work on your own and journal through. It is a very effective way of doing inner work. I didn't really believe in it a whole lot in my earlier years. And in my later years of working with people, and actually when I began to do the journal myself, it is a transformative experience in itself. So the journal is a good thing as well, but you don't have to purchase my journal. You can actually just go buy yourself or have some notebook paper. There is a lot of journaling prompts that are very good out there on the internet as well. And these journaling prompts will really begin to open you up to different parts of you that maybe you didn't know were there. So I want to just thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for more videos on the topic of play. Thank you for watching.